Okay, so as usual, in the usual manner, let's recite Namo Tassa 3 times. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Namo Tassa Bhagavato Arahato Samma Sambuddhassa. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Excuse me. Okay, so we are today going to continue on from 2 weeks ago when we started the reading about Venerable Sariputta, his life from the book, The Great Disciples of the Buddha. It's a book written by Venerable Nyanaponika Thera and Hellmuth Hecker, published by the Buddhist Publication Society in Kandy, Sri Lanka. So the 2 Sundays ago when we read about how Venerable Sariputta, before he became a monk, he was known as Upatissa. And he had a friend, and they go way back. So this was talked about the relationship between Sariputta and his friend Moggallana. So they go way back, not only in the final lifetime, but also in many, many lifetimes before that. And then we saw how they met the Buddha in their quest to find out the path to liberation. We also read about how Venerable Sariputta first formed the aspiration to be a chief disciple of a future Buddha in one of his previous lives. And we also covered short excerpts of the different Jataka stories where Venerable Sariputta, Venerable Moggallana, and the Buddha had some sort of relationship, or had been they had come across each other's path in many, 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 many lifetimes before the final lifetime leading to liberation. And so the connection between them is very, very strong. So we covered all that. And today what we will cover Sariputta, Venerable Sariputta as a person, who he was. And so we're going to cover a few chapters here, starting from this chapter entitled Sariputta the Man. Okay. Okay. So Sariputta the Man, so he was one of the chief disciples, other than Venerable Moggallana. And here we're going to read together in the Mahamoggallana Sutta, which is Digha Nikaya number 14. The Buddha relates various details about the 6 Buddhas who preceded him, beginning with the Buddha Vipassi 91 aeons ago. He mentions their names, the periods in which they arose, their caste and clan, their lifespan, and the milestones of their teaching careers. So a Buddha is one who can, one of the, how should I say, the powers of a Buddha, one of them is to be able to recollect not only their previous lifetimes, but the previous lifetimes of others as well. And so here the Buddha is relating to stories of 6 Buddhas who preceded him. So this is many, many countless aeons. So here he also states the names of their 2 chief disciples, who are in each case described as the chief pair of disciples, the excellent pair. Elsewhere in the Pali Canon, the Buddha declares that all of the Buddhas of the past had a pair of chief disciples, such as he had in Sariputta and Moggallana, and all the Buddhas to arise in the future will likewise have such a pair, always two. From such statements, we can see that the posts of chief discipleship are inherent in the very nature of the Buddha's dispensation. So when we read the suttas, I can't remember exactly which sutta it is in the Majjhima Nikaya. Someone can help me out here. Where it's like Venerable, it's the analogy given is like Venerable Sariputta is the mother and Venerable Moggallana is the nurse. Actually, please correct me if I'm wrong. I probably got it the other way around. I always mix it up. And they go hand in hand. And a lot of times when people come to them and students come to them in the beginning, if I recall correctly, and again, my memory fails me, they would study under Venerable Sariputta. He would train them up to a certain level, and then when they want to go a little bit further, then they would then go to Venerable Moggallana to receive further instructions from there. So they both kind of work as a team, so to speak, a very good team, and are like, you can say the sidekicks, the chief sidekicks of the Buddha. So like right-hand man, left-hand man kind of thing, if you want to think of it that way. So there's always two is what here it's saying. Thus, in appointing two monks as chief disciples, our Buddha Gotama was not acting according to his own caprice, but was conforming to a timeless paradigm, a paradigm followed by all the fully enlightened ones of the past, and to be followed by all their successors in the future. The basic functions of the chief disciples within the dispensation may be enumerated as threefold. So the first is to help the master in consolidating the Dhamma, and thereby in making it a vehicle of spiritual transformation and deliverance for as many beings as possible, both human and celestial. So we know that the Buddha actually not only taught in the human realm, but he also taught to the higher realms, celestial realms. So he quite often would travel up to, using his supernormal ability, would travel up to the higher realms to teach those in the higher realms. Last week, Bhante Dhamma Gavesi gave a talk about merits and how he read from the Itivuttaka, and how it was stated that, the Buddha encouraged the monks. He did not discourage them from making merit, because it was trying to curb a common belief that if we make a lot of merit, then we would go be reborn in the higher realms, in the realms of the devas, let's say, and then we would miss the opportunity to become enlightened. So that discussion was to curb that belief that celestial beings cannot gain enlightenment. So even in the higher realms, there is still opportunity to continue the practice. Okay, those of you who are interested, you can go back to, it is recorded and uploaded in the YouTube channel. All right, so let's keep going. So the first is to help the master in consolidating the Dhamma, and thereby in making it a vehicle. So making the Dhamma as a kind of a vehicle of spiritual transformation and deliverance for as many beings as possible. Number two is to serve as models for the other monks to emulate and to supervise their training. So the Buddha is one person, and he would often go out a lot and travel a lot as well. So having two chief disciples is kind of like a sidekick to, in a way, supervise, in a way, be role models for other monks. And number 3, to assist in the administration of the Sangha, particularly when the Blessed One goes into solitary retreat or travels alone on an urgent mission. Sometimes the Buddha did travel alone. So every morning when the Buddha wakes up, he will use his what's called the great compassion. So he will cast his compassionate eye out to see who out there is ready on that day to receive the Dhamma. So one recent example, which we read together with Brother Sachinji, was the story of Venerable Angulimala a couple of weeks ago. So that is one example when the Buddha, when he was casting his great compassionate eye, he saw that the time was ripe for Angulimala to receive the teaching, and so he traveled to where Angulimala was to kind of stop him from murdering his own mother. Okay, so there's various instances in the suttas here and there and everywhere that the Buddha does do that. And that's also one of the reasons why Venerable Ananda made the Buddha promise to him that if the Buddha ever traveled out without Venerable Ananda and he had given a sermon, that the Buddha would always come back and repeat the same sermon to Venerable Ananda. So they had that understanding. Okay. Always, the Buddha remains the final authority at the head of the dispensation, and the appointment of chief disciples does not represent in any way a democratic devolution of powers. Okay, I'll read this through very quickly because it's commentaries here at this point. It's not really talking so much about Venerable Sariputta. So I'll run this through very quickly so that we can go to read about Sariputta the Helper, okay? The Blessed One is the sole source of the teachings, the revealer of the path, the supreme charioteer of persons to be tamed. But just as a king requires ministers to supervise the affairs of state, so the Buddha, the king of the Dhamma, delegates responsibility for particular spheres of training to his best qualified disciples in each area. Naturally, the most demanding task falls on the 2 chief disciples who possess the acumen and ability needed to discharge them most effectively. So although the Buddha always has 2 chief disciples, he has other main disciples, senior disciples as well, each of them having, how should we say, specialties in their area. And so that's also part of what forms this book. So this book doesn't only cover Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana, but covers a number of other of the main main disciples of the Buddha as well. So we thus can see that appointment to chief discipleship is far from being an entitlement to special perks and privileges. To be appointed a chief disciple is to shoulder an immensely heavy responsibility in all areas of the dispensation. It is to share the Buddha's burden of compassion and to work in close cooperation with him to ensure that the Dhamma becomes successful and prosperous, extended, popular, widespread, well-proclaimed among devas and humans. Okay. The reason the Buddha always appoints 2 chief disciples seems to be to achieve an optimal balance between the spheres of responsibility and the human aptitudes available to meet them. Buddha unites in his own person all perfections. He is the sage perfect in all respects. But human beings of lesser stature, even enlightened arhants, will display diversities in their characters and talents that qualify them for different tasks. And this is normal, this is common, because it depends on each individual, what they have been practicing in multiple lifetimes. The Buddha is one who is that's a reason, when we chant like the Itipiso Bhagava Arahang Samma Sambuddha, and so on and so forth, the 9 qualities of the Buddha, he is, through many, many lifetimes cultivating the 10 perfections, able to have a wide coverage of, how should I put this? His skill in terms of many areas, he's able to achieve that. Whereas a lot of even enlightened arahants, they will display different skill in different specialty areas depending on what their inclination is in various lifetimes. So that's why it's not easy to become a Buddha. It takes many, 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 many aeons, countless lifetimes, because of the mastery, that's the word I was looking for, mastery in the different skills that's required. I don't know if that made sense, but if nothing will make sense, and if anyone has any questions, feel free to stop me. Okay, so let's keep going. Thus, to supervise the main areas of responsibility, a Buddha is invariably attended by 2 chief disciples, one constantly at his right hand and the other at his left. Of the 2, the right-hand disciple, the one regarded as closest to the Blessed One, is the disciple distinguished by excellence of wisdom. In the case of the Buddha Gotama, this was the Venerable Sariputta. So sometimes we see in the suttas when there is a conversation and all that, or if somebody's having a conversation with Venerable Sariputta and then goes on to verify what Venerable Sariputta says with the Buddha himself, the Buddha will sometimes be quoted as saying, yes, Venerable Sariputta's wisdom is second to none. His wisdom is equivalent to me, things like that. So it's a measure of, in terms of excellence in wisdom, really, other than the Buddha, Venerable Sariputta comes next, so to speak. Whereas, and then we will read later on, his special task in the dispensation is the systemization of the doctrine and the detailed analysis of its content by means of his deep insight into the ultimate truth and his sharp discernment of the sphere of differentiated phenomena. He is responsible for drawing out the subtle implications of the Dhamma and for explicating its meaning with a wealth of detail that the Buddha cannot personally attend to himself. The other chief disciple, who stands at the Buddha's left hand, is distinguished by his versatility in the exercise of spiritual power, so the idis. So here, in the present Buddha Gotama Sangha, this position was held by the Venerable Mahamoggallana. So in terms of the skill mastery of spiritual powers, Venerable Mahamoggallana's spiritual power is only second to the Buddha, let's say. Okay, so on one hand is a chief disciple foremost in wisdom, then on the left is chief disciple foremost in spiritual power. Okay. Such spiritual power is not a means of dominating others or of self-aggrandizement, but must be founded upon a perfect realization of selflessness. So it's more like it's not like you actively want to collect idis, but it's more as a result of their practice. Okay? So the power springs specifically from mastery over the sphere of concentration or collectedness, samadhi, which opens up a profound comprehension of the fundamental forces that govern mind and matter and their subtle interconnections. Basically, it means the understanding of, well, in the way I understand it, the understanding of dependent origination and how everything works, really. To put it simply, in simpler terms. Guided by the compassionate ideals of the Dhamma, this power is used to remove obstacles to the secure establishment of the dispensation in the world and to transform other beings who cannot be easily reached by the gentler transformative approach of verbal instruction. So sometimes in the suttas, we see how, again, it depends if at the time they realize that, oh, okay, such and such a person came into contact with them, they cannot be taught using the normal verbal instructions, but can possibly be taught with some form of use of supernatural powers, then they might use that. So in the example of the story of Angulimala, so that was a very good example where the Buddha used his supernormal powers to project to Angulimala that the Buddha is no longer running, but no matter how far or how fast Angulimala runs, he still cannot catch up with the Buddha. So that is by use of a super normal powers. Detailed discussion of the Venerable Sariputta's first major task as chief disciple, the systemization of the Dhamma, will be undertaken in the next chapter when we examine his role as turner of the wheel. Here we will focus upon the ways Sariputta and Moggallana jointly fulfill the other two roles of chief disciples, serving as exemplars and mentors for the monks and assisting in the administration of the Sangha. In an injunction given to the Sangha, the Buddha held up the two chief disciples as models for the other monks to follow. A monk of faith, O bhikkhus, should cherish this right aspiration. Oh, may I become such as Sariputta and Moggallana. For Sariputta and Moggallana are the model and standard for my bhikkhu disciples. So in their mastery over the three aspects of the path, virtue, concentration, and wisdom, or the sila, samadhi, panya, they embodied the qualities the monks still in training were to acquire for themselves. But even more, because they both possessed the analytical knowledges and skill in speech, they were ideal teachers to whom the younger monks could turn for guidance and instruction. So, what it's trying to say is that not all monks, or not all, let's say, arhats even have the skill in speech or the verbal quality to be able to be ideal teachers. So having a good understanding or a strong foundation and understanding of the Dhamma is one thing. Being able to teach it so that others can understand and in turn practice is another. And not everyone has qualities of both. Now, the Buddha, of course, have those qualities. And on top of that, he has the ability to connect, for lack of a better word, directly with whoever he's trying to teach, so that it makes sense to that person can relate. Okay. Yeah, so he has that ability. The relationship in which the two chief disciples stood to one another in the matter of teaching was explained by the Buddha in the Saccavibhanga Sutta. Here we go. So my answer is here. It is indeed in the Saccavibhanga Sutta in the Majjhima Nikaya. Associate, O monks, with Sariputta and Moggallana and keep company with them. They are wise bhikkhus and helpers of their fellow monks. So I remembered correctly. Sariputta is like a mother who brings forth, and Moggallana is like a nurse to the newborn child. Sariputta trains his pupils in the fruition of stream entry, right up to stream entry. Moggallana trains them for the highest goal, up till final liberation. So for those who are interested, you can go to Majjhima Nikaya 141 Saccavibhanga Sutta. Okay, it's one of the paragraphs there. Okay, in explanation of this passage, the Majjhima commentary says, when Sariputta accepted pupils for training, whether they were ordained by him or by others, he favored them with his material and spiritual help, looked after them in sickness, gave them a subject of meditation, basically an object of meditation. And at last, when he knew that they had become stream enterers, Sotapanna, and had risen above the dangers of the lower worlds, he dismissed them in the confident knowledge now they can, by their own strength, produce the higher stages of holiness. Having thus become free from concern about their future, he instructed new groups of pupils. So they basically are like churning out more, you know, continuously churning out enlightenment, you know. Okay, that probably doesn't sound right. Makes them almost like, you know, in the process like a factory. Not really, but it's more like the sole purpose of dispensing the Dharma and also protecting the Buddha's dispensation. So that's why they do that. Let me see. Where was I? Okay. Yeah, but Moggallana, when training pupils in the same way, did not give up concern for them until they had attained arahantship. This was because he felt, as was said by the master, as even a little excrement is of evil smell, I do not praise even the shortest spell of existence, be it no longer than a snap of the fingers. So he, in that sense, was quite, you know, let's go to the end. It is said that whenever Sariputta gave advice, he showed infinite patience. He would admonish and instruct up to 100 or 1,000 times until his pupil was established in the fruition of stream entry. So I think it was in one of the talks, or maybe a couple of times, Venerable Sister Kema mentioned before. Actually, I can't exactly remember if it was Venerable Sister or if it was Bhante Vimala Ramsi, but basically they did say that if one were to aspire to be a twin guide, let's say, or guide or a teacher of some sort, then one has to be patient and be ready to repeat the same thing again and again and again and again and again and again and again. Okay, that's one of the things that, you know, a guide would have to be prepared to do, basically, to repeat the same thing again and again. So this is what it's trying to say. Sariputta had that ability, that infinite patience. He would again and again admonish, again and again instruct until his pupil established in the fruition of stream entry. Only then did he discharge the student and give his advice to others. Very great was the number of those who, after receiving his instruction and following it faithfully, attained to arahantship. So he was very, very skillful in this. But although the Majjhima commentary states that Sariputta used to lead his regular pupils only up to stream entry, in individual cases, he helped monks to attain the higher stages. The Udana commentary, for example, says that at that time, bhikkhus in higher training often used to approach the Venerable Sariputta for a subject of meditation that could help them to attain the 3 higher paths. Basically after, so Sakadagami, Anagami, and Arhatship. So it was after taking instructions from Sariputta that the elder Lakuntika Bhadiya attained Arhatship, having been a stream enterer at the time. Okay. As the chief disciples, the Sariputta and Moggallana shared the responsibility for supervising the affairs of the Sangha under the immediate direction of the Blessed One. And they were the ones expected to take charge in the master's absence. On one occasion recorded in the Chatuma Sutta, the Buddha makes this point clear by reproaching the Venerable Sariputta for failing to recognize his responsibility. Once a large number of monks, newly ordained, had come to pay respects to the Buddha for the first time. On arrival, they were allotted quarters and started chatting with the resident monks of Chatuma. Hearing the noise, the Buddha summoned the resident monks and to question them about it, and was told that the commotion was caused by the new arrivals. The text does not say the visiting monks were present at the time, but they must have been, for the Buddha addressed them with the words, "Go away, monks, I dismiss you. You should not stay with me." The newly ordained monks left, but some lay supporters intervened on their behalf and they were allowed to return. The Buddha then said to Sariputta, "What do you think, Sariputta, when I dismissed that group of monks?" Sariputta replied, "I thought the Blessed One wishes to live at ease and to abide in the state of happiness here and now. So we too shall live at ease and abide in the state of happiness here and now." "Wait, Sariputta, do not allow such a thought ever to arise in you again," the Buddha said. Then turning to Moggallana, he put the same question to him. "When the Blessed One dismissed those monks," replied Moggallana, "I thought the Blessed One wishes to live at ease and to abide in the state of happiness here and now. Then Sariputta and I should now look after the community of monks." "Well spoken, Moggallana, well spoken," said the master. "It is either I myself, or Sariputta, or Moggallana, who should look after the community of monks." It was the Venerable Sariputta too who first appealed to the Buddha to lay down the code of monastic rules. He had asked the Buddha why it was that the dispensation of some of the Buddhas of the past did not last very long, while that of others did. And the Buddha had replied that the dispensation did not last long in the case of those Buddhas who did not preach much Dhamma, nor lay down regulations for the disciples, nor institute the recital of the Patimokkha. The Patimokkha is the rules for the monks and nuns to follow. So there is a tradition to recite that fortnightly, I think. Full moon, new moon. I can't remember. But yeah, that is a tradition that is still upheld till today. But the dispensation of those Buddhas who took these precautions endured. The precautions, basically the act of preaching much Dhamma, laying down regulations for the disciples, basically the Vinaya, the rules for monks and nuns, and forming the tradition of reciting the Patimokkha. So Sariputta then got up, saluted the master respectfully, and said, "It is now time for the Blessed One to promulgate the regulations and to lay down the Patimokkha so that the holy life might last for a long time." But the Buddha replied, "Let it be, Sariputta. The Tathagata himself will know the occasion for that. The master will not lay down regulations for the disciples, nor recite the Patimokkha until signs of corruption have appeared in the Sangha. This concern that the dispensations should endure as long as possible is characteristic of Sariputta. Equally characteristic was it of the Buddha, that he did not wish to lay down regulations until such time as it was absolutely necessary to do so. So a lot of times in the early years of the Buddha, when he was teaching, there were not so many Vinaya rules. But later on, it would be added as and when needed. So he went on to explain that at that time, the least advanced member of the Sangha was a stream enterer, perhaps the fact of which Sariputta was not aware, and therefore it was not yet necessary to lay down the rules of the bhikkhu life. So this was really in the early days. Often the Buddha charged the two chief disciples with special missions arising out of pressing circumstances. One such occasion was when he dispatched them to win back a group of young monks who were being led astray by Devadatta, his cousin. So after Devadatta had formally split the Sangha by declaring that he would conduct Sangha acts separately, he went to Vulture's Peak with 500 young monks whom he had persuaded to become his followers. So then the Buddha sent Sariputta and Moggallana to Vulture's Peak in order to win them back. When Devadatta saw the two elders, Sariputta and Moggallana, approach him, he assumed that they had decided to forsake the Buddha and join his faction. He extended to them a warm welcome and treated them as if they were now his chief disciples. In the evening, while Devadatta was resting, the two elders preached to the monks, led them to the attainment of stream entry, and convinced them to return to the Blessed One. Another time, the Sariputta and Moggallana worked together to restore order in the Sangha, and another time when they worked together to restore order in the Sangha was when a group of monks led by Asaji, so this is another venerable, not the elder Asaji that we had read before 2 weeks ago. So this was another group of monks, junior monks. Asaji, Punna, and Punna Basu, living at Kitagiri. So they were misbehaving. So they ate in the evening when they weren't supposed to. They sang and they danced with young girls in the town, and they mingled with lay people in ways that besmirched the dignity of the Sangha. In spite of repeated admonitions, these monks would not mend their ways. So the two chief disciples were set to pronounce the penalty of banishment, so being banished from the Sangha, on them for refusing to submit to the bliss discipline. So basically remove them from the Sangha. Okay, so I didn't expect that particular chapter to go on so long. The next section is talking about Venerable Sariputta, as title is The Helper. So how he was always very helpful. So just very quickly to run through, because I'm not sure I was trying to gauge how long this chapter, The Helpful, was. So just a check in with everyone, those of you who dialed in today. Would people like me to pause here for today and then resume the next topic in 2 weeks' time? Or would you prefer we continue on the helper? So I have one request here, prefer a pause.
We can pause, May.
Okay, yep. Happy to pause here. Of course, today was really more like a commentary, not so much talking about Venerable Sariputta so much, a little bit here and there. But it does give a little bit of a background, I think, to what we will cover next. Okay, so yeah, so we can pause here today, and then we can resume the next chapters 2 weeks from now. So next Sunday, if I remember correctly, Hugh Polton will come. Topic I'm not sure yet. Okay, and then yeah, we can resume reading this book together the following Sunday. Any comments or questions from today's reading? Sorry, I just realized the book disappeared, so I can put it back here. Okay. Oops. Oh, I did that again. Still trying to figure out how Zoom works. Gosh, they made some upgrades to the tool, so I'm a little bit okay. Here we go. Okay, does anyone have any questions or comments? Has this been useful? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's very interesting. Thank you very much, May.
Thank you. Good to know that it's interesting to read.
Oh yeah, I don't have a question as much as I read this book like a year or so back, and it's quite interesting, but it's, you know, being a chief disciple sounds like a very tough job.
It is a very tough job. It's not as tough as being the Buddha, as in, yeah. But again, 2 weeks ago when we read about the aspiration, where it came from, because the question came from, so Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana were not the first disciples. So before them, there were others. So there were the first 5 disciples at Deer Park. And then there were, I think, a couple of other monks. And then only Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana came in contact with the Buddha. So when the Buddha appointed both of them as chief disciples, some of the other monks questioned. They didn't go against, but they had this discussion amongst themselves. And then the Buddha approached them, and then the Buddha kind of said, what are you all discussing about? What's this talk, you know? And then they kind of said to the Buddha, they say, well, you know, we were kind of wondering, you know, there's these first 5 disciples that you gave the first sermon at Deer Park. There were these other more senior disciples. So basically, you know, the tradition of ordination is the most senior is the first one that's ordained. And so they were saying, well, in terms of seniority by tradition, Venerable Sariputta and Venerable Moggallana are not the most senior. So how come you make them chief disciples? And he said, yeah, your question is not invalid. It is a fairly logical question, and I will explain why. So then we read about, and it's in the book, the Buddha explained in many aeons ago, several Buddhas before, the Venerable Sariputta had witnessed when he was, I think, a Brahmin at that time. He had witnessed the then Buddha with his chief disciples. And at that point, as he was making merit, he made the aspiration at that point, may I become a chief disciple of a future Buddha. And at that time, the then Buddha saw this thought in the then Sariputta and then said to him, I cast my, eye into the future, and I can see that, yes, your aspiration will come true sometime in the very distant future. So yeah, it has to be a very strong aspiration though. So obviously he made the aspiration when he was making merit in front of the Buddha at that time. So the kind of merit that one makes in that kind of a moment is very powerful. The mental state is very strong. So for example, if I'm sitting in front of you now and I say, oh, okay, Everett, I aspire to be a chief female disciple of a Buddha in the future, it won't work. Is what I'm saying. Because my mental state at this point does not have that strength of determination, Of course, having said that, if I continuously make that aspiration again and again and again, as I'm making merit countless lifetimes, it's very similar to the concept of habit pattern. Just like, so everything is a habit pattern, right? So for example, if we want to walk the path, spiritual path, what is the habit pattern that we're trying to form in our practice? Using the 6 R's in our practice. That's a habit pattern. So basically we are training our brain to recognize, release, relax, smile, return, repeat every time we are, we forget our object of meditation, or we are disturbed by hindrances, or we lost our focus on the task that we are doing at hand, whatever it is. Why do we want to do that? Basically to form the habit pattern, the right habit pattern that will lead us to the final cessation, ultimate enlightenment. And that is why in the scriptures it said, the Buddha says, and Venerable Bhante Vimalaramsi has mentioned this before, the 6 R's can take us all the way to Nibbana because it's a habit pattern. Does that help? I don't know if I answered the question. I think I went in a big roundabout. Sorry, I meant to answer directly. I'll try.
Very good. Yeah.
Yeah, I affirm it is an excellent answer. Thank you very much, Mei.
Okay. Thank you. I keep reminding myself, go direct to the point, but sometimes I end up in a roundabout. So please catch me next time if I start going astray in a roundabout. I'm trying to train myself to be more direct to the point, if I can remember. Okay. But thank you for those comments. Does anyone else have any other thing before we wrap up? Anything else to share? No? Okay, then let us share some merits because that is also very important. So the opportunity actually to come together like this, even though we do it virtually, to listen to the Dhamma together, to discuss, to support one another in the practice, actually is very important. Having spiritual friendship to support one another, as the Buddha said, is a very important factor in our practice. And so as we're doing in this, it is also important to remember that Having had this opportunity, we should remember to share merits with all beings as well. Okay, so let's share merits together. May suffering ones be suffering free, and the fear-struck fearless be. May the grieving shed all grief, and may all beings find relief. May all beings share this merit that we have thus acquired for the acquisition of all kinds of happiness. May beings inhabiting space and earth, devas and nagas of mighty power, share this merit of ours. May they long protect the Buddha's dispensation. Sadhu, sadhu, sadhu. Okay. Thank you so much, everyone. Those of you who dialed in, those of you who will be listening to this, I hope you enjoy this. It was a bit dry today, I think. But yeah, we will continue on reading from this book in 2 weeks' time. Okay, see you next Sunday. Hopefully, in the meantime, have a good week. Keep smiling as much as you can. All right, bye-bye.